I know there are families where everything feels light. Mornings filled with laughter, evenings spent watching favorite shows together. Mine wasn't one of them. My name is Abigail Whitmore, 31 years old, born and raised in the suburbs of Stamford, Connecticut. Even as a child, I understood that in my household, freedom was a luxury. While my classmates could wear sweaters with silly bears to school, I had to stand still in front of the mirror and wait for my mom to decide which color suited my personal image. My mother, Lorraine Whitmore, was the deputy executive director of a media company. She could turn a tense boardroom into a product launch event with just one glance. But she brought that same intensity home, managing me like a marketing campaign. Every move I made was monitored: who I befriended, what books I read, even which hobbies I was allowed to have. No one wants their daughter to be forgettable, she once told me when I asked why I couldn't sign up for the watercolor class I loved. What do you think painting does for you? No one hires artists for strategic meetings. Then there was my father, Malcolm Whitmore, the perfect image of financial control. As an investment advisor for a circle of elite clients in New York, he could spot a 0.25% interest rate difference from across the room. To him, I was just an unprofitable asset. Money isn't for children. He would cut me off coldly whenever I asked if I could use some birthday money to buy a camera. Spending without foresight is a sign of future failure. I wasn't allowed to hold on to cash. Any gifts I received from grandparents, relatives, or friends had to be deposited into a safety account under his control. I never saw a statement. All I had was a small burgundy velvet notebook where I was required to log every cent I spent, even a stick of gum after school. Every line in that notebook felt like a confession. And while I lived under that microscope, my younger brother Nathan was treated like royalty. He was 4 years younger, but our parents never saw him as a child. Nathan's room was off limits. He had his own lock, a state-of-the-art sound system, and a $1,000 model car collection funded by so-called academic incentive bonuses, even though his math grades barely passed. When he broke the new TV-playing ball in the living room, my dad chuckled. "The boy needs space to develop his motor skills," he said, then replaced it with a bigger one. As for me, I lost phone privileges for a week just for coming home 10 minutes late from a club meeting, even after texting in advance. "What you need is discipline, not excuses," my mom said, eyes glued to her laptop. I used to think that if I worked hard enough, they'd notice me. I made good grades, never caused trouble, always went to bed on time. But all that did was tighten their grip. My achievements became justifications for raising the bar, never reasons for celebration. Once I won second place in a statewide essay contest on the topic of the value of freedom. I handed my certificate to my mom. She glanced at it and set it down. "Second place isn't really worth talking about," she said, then turned to Nathan. "Do you want to go skiing this weekend?" That's when I understood my efforts would never be enough. Fairness didn't exist in our home. I started dreaming of a world where I could decide what to wear, what to read, how to spend my money. A world where no one stood behind me monitoring everything like I was a malfunctioning robot. But I didn't fight back. Not because I lacked courage, but because I had grown used to needing permission just to breathe. I can't describe the shame of being 17 and standing in a bookstore, clutching a detective novel, only for my mother to pull me away and say, "Trash like that won't raise your SAT score." So I started storing stories in my mind I couldn't write, dreams I couldn't share. And I made myself a promise: I would walk out of that pristine white-fenced house one day and never look back. What I didn't expect was that my parents would never let me leave without leaving a scar. And that scar, well, I'd soon find out, it wasn't a scratch. It was a wound that cut straight through trust and into the life I was building. I started working the moment I turned 16. Not for passion or dreams, but because I needed something of my own. There was a small coffee shop called Maple Cup about a 20-minute walk from home. The pay was low, minimum wage, and maybe some tips if customers were generous. But when a regular left a crumpled $20 bill in the jar and I held it in my hands, I nearly cried. That wasn't just money. It was proof that something in this world could belong to me. To keep it secret, I hid every penny I earned in the bottom of an old Converse shoebox, lined with yellowed magazine pages. After each night shift, I'd carefully count every dollar, every coin, like a miner afraid to scratch the gold vein. I never spent recklessly. While my classmates went shopping on weekends, I stayed home to clean out garages or format documents for a retired teacher. Every cent went into that box. By the time I turned 18, I had close to $8,000. Not a fortune, but enough to get away from that control-choked house. My parents had no clue I'd applied to Norwalk Community College. I chose information systems management, a mix of tech and business that my dad couldn't mock, not that he knew. When I announced I was moving out to share an apartment with 2 other students, my mom nearly shattered her glass. "You won't last 2 months," she said coldly. "And don't expect this house to still have room for you when you come crawling back." My dad didn't even look up from his paper. "That'll be your first mistake in a long list of financial failures." I nodded, grabbed my suitcase, and didn't turn around. The new place was barely a third the size of our old living room, but every wall, every chipped corner made it easier to breathe. I had my own keys, a mini fridge, and a quiet corner no one could take from me. I went to school during the day, worked night shifts as a barista, and spent weekends delivering groceries or doing remote data entry for a logistics firm in Minnesota. Rent, groceries, car repairs. I handled it all myself, fueled by every keystroke at 2 in the morning and every drop of sweat on busy cafe days. After 3 semesters, I had the grades and savings to transfer to the University of New Haven. Tuition doubled, but I kept pushing forward. My GPA earned me a partial scholarship, and I landed an internship at a tech startup building a personal health app. That job opened my eyes. I wasn't just good at logic. I had a real talent for systems analysis and data security. The skills my dad once called useless became how I made a living. After graduation, I was hired full-time as a software engineer. 3 years later, I led the cybersecurity team, a title my parents never acknowledged, but one that always made them squirm when relatives asked. I didn't buy a flashy car or go on lavish trips. Each paycheck was divided: 20% for daily needs, 10% for emergencies, 40% into long-term savings, 30% into high-yield CDs. Every bonus, tax refund, freelance project, I funneled it into a separate hidden account. I didn't want anyone seeing my financial trail, a survival habit born from years of having my pockets searched after school. By 29, I had over $380,000 saved. I was aiming for $400 to buy a small home, not for show, just for peace. A place that was finally mine. A covered porch for reading. A home office with a lock. A bright kitchen where no voice but mine decides what I'm allowed to cook. That wasn't some far-off dream. It was a plan. I had it all mapped out in Excel. Home prices in nearby neighborhoods, renovation costs, risk contingencies, homeowners insurance. I knew I didn't have anyone backing me. I didn't have a family emergency fund, like Nathan bragged about when his car broke down. The closer I got to my goal, the more a quiet joy began blooming in my chest. A sense of peace, like the whole world was about to fall into place, on my terms. But just as the final bricks of my plan began to settle, something started to smell off. A single comment from my mother at a family dinner made me pause. "Your brother just found this beautiful model unit in Westport. Oakwood cabinets and imported Italian floors." I'd never told her about any house. Not a single detail. No photos sent, no words spoken. I smiled stiffly, but under my skin a cold wave crawled up my spine. I didn't know exactly what was coming, but I had a gut feeling. Someone was watching me. Not just my gaze. Every keystroke, every bank detail, every plan I thought I'd locked down. From that moment, the safety I'd spent years building began to splinter. I met Jessica at a tech seminar in Providence. She was the kind of person who entered a room and made the air shift. Direct, brilliant, sharp enough to silence an entire executive board with one well-placed question. No one ever taught me how to love, and certainly not how to trust. But Jessica made everything feel oddly gentle. She didn't ask why I checked the locks 3 times, didn't judge me for spending hours updating my personal finance spreadsheets. "You don't have to make everything perfect," she said one night when I was up until 3 a.m. rechecking payment ledgers. "But if it helps you feel safe, then do it. We get to choose the life that feels safe for both of us." We moved in together 13 months into dating. A 2-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor, overlooking a maple-lined street in Bridgeport. Not fancy, not new, but quiet, close to work, and free of anything named Whitmore. Jessica was the first to mention buying a house. "You've saved like a legend," she said while we split a plate of pancakes. "With the market now, the longer you wait, the harder it'll get. If you find the right place, take it seriously." I hesitated. Part of it was fear of commitment. The rest was fear of my parents worming their way into yet another thing I built. But Jessica was right. Home prices in Connecticut were climbing quarter by quarter, and interest rates were shockingly low. We started listing areas, needs, budgets. I stuck to my $400,000 goal, secretly hoping to find something better for less. 3 weeks later, we stood in a Cape Cod-style wood frame home in Stratfield, sunlight spilling across the backyard and the wind rustling through red maple leaves. 3 bedrooms, a small home office, kitchen fully renovated with walnut cabinets and marble counters. Listed price, $384,900. That office would be perfect for your freelance projects, Jessica whispered. We could grow herbs in the backyard. This house feels like it's been waiting for us. I didn't respond. I just stood there, running my fingers over the window latch, feeling like I was touching something that had always been mine but I'd never been allowed to keep. I didn't tell my parents. Not a word. The weekly calls continued, pointless stories, veiled digs disguised as care. I kept replies short, never revealing anything about house plans or the savings I guarded like a limb. We scheduled a second viewing that Saturday afternoon, this time with the realtor to go over contract details. On the drive home, I got a text from my mother. Your dad says the house you're buying has beautiful oakwood floors. Is that true? My hand gripped the steering wheel tight. No one, no Jessica, no realtor, no close friend, had ever mentioned the floors specifically. I had never texted, emailed, or posted about it. I forced a smile, replied with a question mark. But inside, the chill spread deeper, like I'd just walked into a room and someone was already standing in the dark. That night, I stayed up past 1 a.m. checking my laptop, iPad, phone. Nothing suspicious. No strange emails, no recently installed apps, no obvious breaches. But the dread didn't fade. Jessica saw me hunched over the laptop and pulled up a chair beside me. What's going on? I shook my head, laughed dryly. My mom just brought up the wood floors in the house. They don't even know I'm touring. No one told them. I don't get how. Jessica was silent for a moment, then slowly asked, how long have you been using that laptop? Over 2 years. When was the last time your parents touched it? I froze. A Sunday afternoon 4 months ago when my car broke down and I'd stopped by their house. While I called roadside assistance, my dad offered to clean up the system, since my machine seemed slow. He kept it for over 3 hours. He said he'd remove junk files and upgrade software, I whispered. Jessica tilted her head, eyes sharpening. We need to scan the whole system. No. Not just software, network permissions, device access. She didn't ask why my father would do something like that. He didn't need to. Because when someone has tried to control what you wear, eat, and study your whole life, tracking your bank account or GPS doesn't seem that far-fetched. I trembled, thinking that someone might be watching my every move. Not some stranger hacker in a dark cafe, but the man who once taught me how to tie my shoes, who cut my bank card in half when I was 12 for buying a paperback. I thought I'd escaped them. But clearly, I had underestimated how far they'd go to keep their grip on my life. The notification popped up while I was washing dishes. New device login confirmed, 4:42 p.m. I froze, water still running over my hands. No new device. No login attempt today. Heart racing, I opened the banking app, authenticated in, and pulled up the access logs. A strange IP address showed up, coming from New Haven, right at the moment that notification popped up. I hadn't used a network there since quitting my office job 3 months ago. Jessica stepped out of the bedroom, her eyes locking onto my face. What's wrong? I didn't answer. My feet moved quickly toward the desk as I opened my laptop. No unusual transactions showed up yet, but the crawling sense of being watched wouldn't go away. I launched the security scan and set it to deep mode. Less than 10 minutes later, the system flagged an unidentified background process. Hidden and encrypted, running silently. I'd never installed anything like it. It wasn't part of the default operating system. I pasted the name into a search engine. The results made my throat go dry. A high-level spyware program capable of logging keystrokes, capturing screenshots periodically, and sending data back to a remote server. Some tech forums even categorized it as enterprise grade, typically used for internal investigations or unauthorized surveillance. I had never used it. Never given anyone permission to install it. Everything slowed down as my mind replayed that image of my father sitting at my desk, leaning over the laptop with the look of a well-meaning dad. Let me handle it. Just a light cleanup software, won't take long. The floor felt like it vanished beneath my feet. Jessica grabbed my arm. Uninstall it. Save the evidence. Then use a different device to check your bank accounts. I nodded, pulled out my old phone, popped in the SIM card and used cellular data to connect. A siren rang in my head, a question I hadn't dared say out loud. If he had access to the device, had he seen my account info? I logged into my primary savings account. Two-factor authentication popped up. I confirmed. It took nearly 10 seconds for the screen to fully load. Available balance: $0.00. A white blankness burst through my mind, then a heartbeat so loud it echoed through my ribs. I didn't dare blink. I opened the transaction history. One domestic transfer, at exactly 3:30 p.m. today, moved nearly $390,000 to another account. Recipient: Malcolm R. Whitmer. My throat closed. My mouth opened but no sound came out. Felt like someone had stabbed me in the chest and left the blade in. Jessica screamed when she saw the name on the screen. No. No way. This can't be real. I shot to my feet, rushed to the bedroom, tore open drawers and grabbed every bank document, statement, old record I had. Everything listed me as the sole account holder. No cosigners, no access granted to anyone. I had managed it independently since I was 19. No one else had the codes. Unless they had been watching the entire time from inside my computer. I called the bank's hotline. The representative confirmed the transfer was executed through a valid login using full biometric verification. I asked if it could be reversed. I'm sorry, ma'am. The transaction was completed and cannot be reversed, as it was processed with the authorized credentials. I hung up without remembering what I'd said. Every sound around me felt vacuumed out like air from a balloon. Jessica handed me a glass of water. I pushed it away, stood up, my voice rasping. I can't believe he did this. After all those years telling me I was reckless, that I didn't know how to manage money. They emptied my account without a word. We're going to fight this. We won't let this go, Jessica said firmly. I walked to the table and scribbled in big letters on a notepad. Safe account. 10 days ago, when I began noticing small red flags, I'd transferred the majority of my savings to a separate account at a different bank. I opened it in person at a branch with my original documents. No online footprint left behind. Thankfully, I'd managed to move over $350,000. Only about $40,000 remained in the original account, the exact amount that was stolen. I let out a dry laugh that startled Jessica. He thought he was clever. But he had no idea I planned ahead. Still, the rage didn't subside. The fact that they installed software on my personal device, tracked every keystroke, every login, it crossed a line I hadn't even imagined. This wasn't a family disagreement anymore. This was deliberate, calculated violation. I inhaled slowly, my voice calmer now. Tomorrow I'm going to their house. You're not going alone, are you? Jessica asked, her eyes wide. I need to look them in the eye. I need them to see I'm not the obedient little daughter they used to control. I mapped out my approach in silence. The fire in me wasn't just fury, it was focus. The people who once lectured me about principles and mocked my independence had trampled over everything I spent 13 years building. They had crossed the one boundary that should have never been touched: trust. The car stopped by the moss-lined curb in a quiet neighborhood on the south side of Westport. I sat motionless behind the wheel, eyes locked on the house ahead. The same one I grew up in, once dreamed of escaping, once vowed never to return to unless absolutely necessary. The white fence remained spotless, neatly trimmed. The wisteria still dangled gracefully over the porch, untouched by time. But to me, everything had shifted the moment my parents treated my savings as if it had always been theirs. I rang the doorbell. My mother opened the door. She froze slightly, her face trying to stay calm but couldn't hide the unease. Abigail? You didn't call ahead. I'm not here for tea. I walked in. No questions. No waiting. The scent of rosewater mixed with oak hit me and twisted my stomach. My father sat in the reading room, still wearing his gray suit and burgundy tie. He took off his glasses and looked up like I was just a surprise guest checking in on his health. What's so urgent? I didn't waste time. You transferred every dollar from my savings account into your personal one. Explain. He leaned back in the chair, voice steady like he was negotiating a business deal. That was a family decision. That money will be used for something more meaningful. What family? I raised an eyebrow. I don't remember agreeing to anything. My mother stepped in from the kitchen, her voice carrying a hint of warning. Don't be dramatic. You don't understand the full picture. I crossed my arms. Then let me hear what your full picture looks like. My father sighed, stood up, hands in his pockets like a CEO about to advise a junior employee. Your brother Mason just got accepted into the MBA program at Stanford. But the tuition and cost of living are steep. He's also developing a startup idea in automated logistics. That money, it's necessary to give him a solid start. I laughed, a sharp sound cracking through the stifling air. You're calling it necessary to justify theft? Don't exaggerate, Abigail, my mother snapped. We're a family. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for one another. I've sacrificed my youth, my freedom, so you two could rest easy knowing I could handle myself. And now I'm expected to bankroll my brother's future. My father lifted his brow. Don't forget, you lived under this roof, ate the food we paid for, got your education from our money. Since I was 19, I haven't taken a single dollar from anyone. Every cent I earned was tracked, managed, and saved. That money isn't something just anyone gets a say over. It's my work. I tossed a printed transaction report onto the table. Pulling data isn't hard. You installed spyware on my computer 4 months ago, when I left it here. Every time I logged into my bank, you saw it. You watched my home buying plans, my emails with my partner. You call that protection? My father paused. Then slowly he smiled. You really think you're smart enough to hide everything from me? No. I think you got careless long enough to make a mistake. My voice was ice as I pulled another document from my coat pocket. What you took was just what was left, $39,000. I already moved $351,000 to a different bank beforehand in person with physical paperwork. No digital trail. Nothing for you to track. My mother's face turned pale. You're lying. Should I call the bank and have them confirm? The front door swung open. Mason walked in, backpack slung over one shoulder, headphones draped around his neck. His eyes landed on me, then flicked to our parents. What's going on? Mason, I looked him straight in the eye. Mom and Dad transferred my entire savings to you. About $39,000. They said it was for your future. He looked stunned. What? I didn't ask for that. I didn't know anything. He turned to our parents. Tell me I wasn't involved. Say it. Don't overreact, my mother interjected. We did it for the greater good. Your brother is going to do something big. You were just going to sink the money into some meaningless house. Meaningless. I said each word slowly. A place where I can live without being watched, controlled, or manipulated is meaningless. My father narrowed his eyes. You're thinking emotionally. Our decisions are strategic. Mason will generate 10 times that value. Mason stepped back like he needed physical distance from his own bloodline. I'm not taking her money. If I had known, I never would have. Enough, my father barked. You'll do what it takes to succeed. This isn't the time to be soft. I looked at my brother, his face blank with shock, mouth slightly open as if he couldn't process it all. His eyes met mine, soaked with guilt. I'll pay you back. No matter how long it takes. I shook my head slightly. It's not you who owes me. It's them. Turning back to my parents, I lowered my voice, making every word land. You have 24 hours to return the $39,000. If not, I go to the police. With full evidence. Computer spying. Unauthorized access. Financial theft. I've consulted the law. No one spoke. I walked out of the house, the sound of my heels hitting the stone path like a series of final locks slamming shut on every ounce of tolerance I had left. I filed a report at the Bridgeport Police Department the next morning. The file was over 100 pages thick. Printed transaction logs, spyware scan results, screenshots of login records, bank statement copies, and screen recordings of the background software in action. The officer who received the file was a woman named Amanda Reyes, petite in frame but sharp-eyed. After thoroughly reviewing the documents, she looked at me and gave a subtle nod. We'll forward this to the cybercrime unit. But I suggest you find a lawyer who specializes in financial crimes. Civil procedures might be quicker and more effective to recover your money. That same day, I called Marlene Greer, a lawyer recommended by a colleague in the cybersecurity field. Her office was on the 8th floor of a glass building in downtown Stamford, overlooking a parking lot laid out like a chessboard. After I laid out my story, she sat in silence for nearly 2 minutes, then removed her glasses and looked me straight in the eye. This is a violation of privacy and unlawful seizure of personal assets. You have strong enough evidence to file for an emergency freeze on their accounts. I nodded. I don't want this to just fade away like it never happened. Then let's begin. 3 days later, a federal judge approved the emergency petition, temporarily freezing my parents' bank accounts to prevent the transfer of the $39,000. We officially filed a lawsuit with 4 civil claims: misappropriation of assets, use of spyware, unauthorized access to a personal system, and invasion of privacy. I thought my parents would stay quiet or settle out of fear. But they didn't back down. They struck back. A week later, Marlene's office received a counterclaim from their attorney, a name well known in Connecticut legal circles, Douglas Mallory, who once represented wealthy businesses accused of money laundering. In the counterclaim, my parents insisted the entire sum allegedly stolen was actually a family reimbursement. They claimed I had received multiple non-repayable financial supports for tuition, rent, and living expenses, totaling $42,600, which according to them I had promised to repay once stable. I held the response in my hands, stunned. Every sentence was fabricated. I had never borrowed a single dollar from them after I turned 19. Every tuition bill, rent payment, and grocery list was covered by my part-time jobs, scholarships, and personal income. Marlene pulled out her red pen, underlining the absurdities in the document. We'll dismantle every claim. They're playing the sentiment card, filial duty, and family debt. But the law has no room for emotional manipulation. I began compiling evidence: pay stubs from my first job to present, freelance invoices, scholarship award letters, rental contracts. Former roommates, teachers, old coworkers, all agreed to provide written statements. They had seen me hustling, scraping by, building everything on my own. One afternoon, I opened my mailbox and saw the headlines splashed across the local news section of the Stamford Voice. 31-year-old woman sues parents for allegedly stealing nearly $40,000 in savings. A debate over family rights versus personal autonomy. They didn't name names, but the details were unmistakable. Cybersecurity engineer living in Bridgeport, parents in finance, brother in an MBA program. Anyone who knew me knew it was about me. The news spread like wildfire through dry woods. Relatives from both sides started calling, texting, emailing. Some defended me, some were shocked, others fell silent with vague unease. That night, I got a call from Aunt Evangeline, my mom's cousin in Syracuse. "Abby," Lorraine cried all morning. She said, "You're trying to ruin the family's reputation over a misunderstanding. No one ever thought you could do something like this." I bit my tongue. Misunderstandings don't install spyware on someone's computer. Misunderstandings don't transfer money without permission. But suing your own parents, don't you think that's too far? Aunt Evie, if anyone else had done this to me, they'd be in jail. I can't just stay silent because the perpetrators share my last name. She sighed and hung up without another word. Jessica stayed beside me all night, her hand holding mine firmly. She didn't need to say much. Her presence alone kept me from collapsing. Mason texted at 3 a.m. "Sis, I had no part in what they did. If you need me to testify, I will." I sat in the dark, heart like a shattered cloud. I wasn't happy he supported me. I was devastated that he even had to pick a side. Family should never feel like a battlefield. But they turned it into one. And I, whether I wanted to or not, had to walk in with every piece of evidence I had. I wasn't seeking forgiveness. I was seeking justice. Courtroom 3 in the Fairfield County Civil Courthouse carried a coldness I couldn't quite name. Not from the air conditioning, but from the tension strung tight from the plaintiff's table to the defense bench across the aisle. I sat upright next to attorney Marlene Greer. In front of us were stacks of color-coded files. Bank statements, login logs, spyware scans, witness affidavits. Everything mapped out like a blueprint to the truth. Across from us, my father wore a gray pinstripe suit, arms folded. My mother, in a pearl-white blouse, sat rigid beneath expertly applied makeup. Neither looked in my direction. Their lawyer, Douglas Mallory, flipped through his notes with the weary precision of a man used to dirty wars. Judge Eleanor Brandt entered, silver hair in a tight bun, voice firm but not cold. "Let's begin the proceedings." Marlene began. Her voice held no theatrics, only a steady rhythm sharp as a scalpel. "Your Honor, this is not a typical family dispute. This is a premeditated act. Digital surveillance, account invasion, and unauthorized asset transfer, not by a faceless hacker but by the plaintiff's own parents." I was called to the witness stand first. My hands felt cold as I laid them on the Bible for the oath. Then I sat, eyes locked on the people who raised me. No trembling, no hesitation. Marlene asked her questions slowly. I spoke about my work history, how I saved for years, the house I had hoped to buy. I explained how I discovered the spyware, walked the court through bank emails, log history, screen captures of the tracking tool, projected on the courtroom screen. "Miss Abigail, just to clarify, did you ever give your parents access to your personal computer?" "No." "Did you ever give them access to your bank accounts or authorize any transfers?" "Absolutely not." "Did you owe them any tuition, rent, or financial support as claimed in the countersuit?" "I've been financially independent since I was 19. Every supporting document is in the file." Douglas Mallory tried to undermine me, suggesting I was ungrateful, impulsive, emotionally unstable. I didn't shout. I answered with documentation and logic. Then came the digital forensics expert, Reese Chapman, formerly with the FBI's Cyber Division. He walked the court through the spyware's footprint, showing timestamps from when my dad had access to my laptop. The transmission logs traced directly to the IP address at our Westport home. "This is not your average parental monitoring software," Chapman said. "It's a commercial-grade surveillance tool, typically used for industrial espionage, not home environments." The courtroom atmosphere shifted. Then it was Mason's turn. My brother stepped up, wearing a light blue shirt, his face tense but clearly prepared. When Marlene asked if he knew anything about the money, Mason shook his head. "I never asked them to transfer anything from my sister. When I found out the truth, I felt shocked and ashamed. I refused to accept any part of it." "Did anyone in the family ever promise to return the money to Abigail?" "No. They never admitted they were wrong. They only justified it." "Then why are you here today?" "Because someone has to break this cycle. And if I don't stand on the side of truth, then I'm no longer myself." My mother's face faltered. My father looked at my brother like he'd just witnessed betrayal. After the lunch break, the judge suggested both parties try to negotiate. Mallory turned to Marlene. "My clients are willing to return the principal amount along with reasonable damages. We propose $39,000 plus $10,000 for emotional distress, on the condition that the plaintiff drops the case and waives any further legal action." I didn't need long to decide. I don't want silence bought with money. I want a clear ruling from the court. Marlene nodded. "We reject the offer." The trial resumed. The defense attempted to retaliate with emotional arguments, bringing up family duty and the pain of being turned against by a child. But none of it could counter the hard evidence in the record. By the afternoon of the third day, Judge Brandt delivered the ruling. After reviewing all evidence and witness testimony, the court finds the defendants guilty of violating privacy, unauthorized access to personal devices, and misappropriation of funds. The defendants are ordered to repay $39,000 and an additional $50,000 in damages. Furthermore, the defendants are prohibited from accessing any of the plaintiff's accounts or devices in any form. My parents didn't react when the ruling was read. My mother looked down. My father stared at his hands as if calculating his next move. I stood up, relieved. Not because of the money, but because the truth had been declared publicly. I hadn't stayed silent. I hadn't backed down. The house we chose sat on a quiet street in the suburbs of Ridgefield. Red brick exterior, white wooden porch, a backyard just big enough for a picnic table, and rows of lavender along the fence. Final purchase price, $412,000. I paid in full with what was left of my savings after the trial, combined with the compensation. Jessica stood in the empty living room, spun around, and looked up with a bright smile. You just bought space and peace. No one gets to touch that anymore. We hung a wooden world map on the wall, marking every place we'd visited with colored pins. The office was painted a soothing gray-blue. The bedroom had no TV, just warm lighting and a bookshelf pressed against the window. 6 months after the ruling, Jessica proposed. No stage. No flash. Just the two of us, a rainy afternoon, and a walnut box with my name carved in the bottom by her own hands. I don't need you to be anyone else. I just need you to be the woman who stood up for herself. I want to walk with you through every storm, not to shield but to stand beside you. We got married in the fall. A small wedding in our backyard under string lights we hung by hand. Mason stood beside me as best man. Fewer than 30 guests, all people who stayed when things got hard. Since then, life began to rebuild layer by layer. I was invited to speak at a cybersecurity conference in Boston. After the talk, a professor approached and invited me to teach a course on personal financial safety in the digital age at the local community college. The first session had 8 students. The second doubled. A year later, I officially launched an elective program called Digital Boundaries. The curriculum wasn't just about security software. It focused on emotional lines too, the ones people try to cross without a password. Women financially controlled by relatives. Students tricked into sharing sensitive info with people they loved. Kids monitored by the very people who raised them, like me. We taught them how to protect their devices. But more importantly, how to say no. Every course ended with one question: what right do you want back that was once taken from you? Jessica opened her own interior design firm. She hired 2 associates and moved her office near the main square. We shared breakfast in a sunlit kitchen, then each headed to work. No check-ins. No one demanding schedules. Calls from my parents grew fewer. I never blocked them. I just stopped inviting them in. Every holiday I sent a card, short, no photos, just wishing you health. They never replied except for one brief email from my father in March. I thought long and hard before writing this. I no longer pretend what I did was right. The surveillance and money transfer were wrong. Regardless of my intentions, the actions were a violation. I don't expect forgiveness, only want you to know, I understand now. I read that last line over and over. There was no, I'm sorry, but something I'd never seen before, acknowledgement. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I no longer needed to respond to everything he said. That was what I'd earned, the right to silence without guilt. Mason still dropped by every week. He was building a startup for supply chain tracking software. All funding came from angel investors. I used to think not having parental support was a disadvantage, Mason said while helping me reinstall a cabinet door. But actually, being fully responsible for my choices made me grow faster than any business course. I smiled and handed him the screwdriver. I get it. Sometimes freedom isn't about having everything, it's about choosing what you'll no longer accept. We pinned a Polaroid to the fridge, us standing in front of his new office holding up the signed LC papers. Not under anyone's name. Under his own. One Saturday afternoon after class, I stood in the courtyard watching former students chatting. A middle-aged woman once controlled by her son's credit card. A young man whose ex hacked his PayPal. They swapped stories, laughed, shared malware tips. None of them knew much about me. But they understood why I taught this class. And I knew they deserved to learn how to protect themselves. Family doesn't mean ownership. They may give you life, but they don't get to rule it. People say forgiveness is what sets you free. But sometimes what you really need is a boundary. And the strength to move on without asking anyone's permission. Abigail's story is proof that even within a family, personal boundaries must be respected. Betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. It can come from the people closest to us. But instead of staying silent, she stood up for justice and reclaimed her independence. Abigail not only rebuilt her life, but now helps others protect their finances and privacy. She's shown that love cannot exist without respect, and freedom means knowing when to draw the line. What are your thoughts on Abigail's choices and family boundaries? Share your opinion in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, emotional, and deeply meaningful family stories.